Growing older is a fact of life, but losing the spark to dream is a choice. For many people, the later stages of life bring reflection, routine, and sometimes resignation, but not for Harold Bennett. At the age of 72, while most of his peers were settling into retirement, Harold made a decision that would change the course of his life. He decided to chase a dream he had buried for decades. Born in a small town in Ohio, Harold had lived a simple life. He worked as a mail carrier for nearly 40 years, waking up before sunrise, walking countless miles through all seasons, and returning home with tired feet but a warm smile. He married his high school sweetheart, Clara, and together they raised two children. Life was ordinary, but it was filled with love and purpose. Yet, in the quiet corners of his heart, Harold carried a secret. He had always dreamed of being a painter. As a young man, he would sketch on the backs of envelopes and scraps of paper, capturing faces he saw on the street, sunsets that lit up the sky, and moments that stirred his soul. But with the responsibilities of adulthood, he let the dream slip away, thinking it impractical and selfish. Years rolled by, and the world changed around him. Technology surged ahead, neighborhoods transformed, and loved ones aged. Harold retired at 65, just like he was supposed to. But retirement didn't sit well with him. The quiet days felt heavier, and the stillness was more suffocating than relaxing. He took up gardening, read books, watched television, but nothing ignited that feeling he once knew. Then one day, while cleaning the attic, Harold found an old sketchbook. The pages were yellowed with time, but the lines were vivid, alive. He flipped through the drawings, his heart swelling with forgotten excitement. That night, he sat in his garage with a blank canvas and some paints his granddaughter had left behind. His hands trembled slightly, but as he made the first stroke, something awakened inside him. Every evening after that, he painted. He painted the memories of his youth, the faces of people long gone, the beauty he saw in everyday life. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. The joy he found in expressing himself was unlike anything else. His garage transformed into a makeshift studio. Word spread among family and neighbors, and soon people started visiting just to see his work. His daughter created an Instagram page to showcase his art. Within weeks, Harold went viral. Comments poured in from all over the world, people inspired by his talent, his courage, his story. Local galleries took notice, and before long, he was invited to showcase his work. At 73, Harold held his first art exhibition. The night was magical. People walked through the gallery admiring his pieces, shaking his hand, thanking him for reminding them that dreams don't have expiration dates. He stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed but fulfilled, surrounded by laughter, admiration, and love. Reporters interviewed him, magazines featured him, and television channels invited him to share his story. But Harold remained humble. He always said, "I'm just a man who remembered how to dream." His journey inspired others in the community. A 75-year-old woman started writing poetry again. An 80-year-old man learned to play the piano. Dreams, long buried under responsibilities and years, began to bloom in people's hearts once more. Harold's story reached nursing homes, senior centers, and schools. His message was clear. Age is just a number. The heart has no wrinkles. He continued to paint every day, sometimes selling his work and donating the proceeds to local charities. He taught free painting classes to children and senior citizens, encouraging them to find their voice through colors. For Harold, it was never about fame or money. It was about expression, connection, and the simple joy of doing what he loved. His wife, Clara, supported him wholeheartedly. She would sit beside him, offering tea, telling him which paintings she liked most, and laughing when he made a mess. Their bond grew deeper in those years, a beautiful testament to love that matures with time. Life gave Harold a second chance, and he embraced it with both hands. He lived fully, fearlessly, with a brush in his hand and a dream in his heart. He showed the world that passion doesn't fade. It just waits patiently for you to return. As Harold turned 80, his energy remained infectious. He still painted, still taught, still smiled at every visitor who came to see the old man with the young dream. His life was a canvas, bold, colorful, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. And as he always said with a sparkle in his eyes, "You're never too old to dream." The world had embraced Harold Bennett's message with open arms, but what made his story timeless wasn't the recognition it brought him, but the transformation it had inspired in others. From the quiet towns in Midwest America to bustling cities across the ocean, Harold's journey ignited something in those who had resigned themselves to a life of routine without passion. A woman in her late 60s from Japan who had long ago abandoned her love for dance found herself moving again in her living room, her frail joints finding rhythm once more. An old man in Italy who used to play the violin as a child took his dusty instrument from the attic and played a tune that brought his wife to tears. Harold never met these people, but his paintings did. His courage did. His story whispered to them in their native tongues that time had not forgotten them and that their dreams were waiting patiently like loyal companions. After a long journey, even in his own town, the ripple effect was unmistakable. Harold began receiving letters from strangers, people thanking him for waking up their dreams. Many shared stories of fear of judgment, of thinking they were too late to start anew. Harold read each letter with care and sometimes painted a piece inspired by the words he received. He kept those letters in a wooden box by his easel and called it his treasure chest of hope. Every morning he opened one at random before he began painting, as if the words were a spark to light his creativity. Even schools began inviting Harold to speak, not because he was a celebrity, but because he was real. Children listened with wide eyes as he spoke of forgotten dreams and rediscovered joy. He told them never to silence their inner voice, never to believe that dreams have an expiry date. He told them that life may take you down many paths, but it's never too late to take a turn toward your passion. He didn't speak like a preacher or a motivational speaker. He spoke like a grandfather who had lived 1,000 lives and found the secret he'd been looking for all along in the brush of a paint stroke. Time continued to move, as it always does, and Harold's health began to slowly decline. His steps became slower, his hands a little less steady, but the fire in his soul burned brighter than ever. Clara remained by his side, her love as constant as the sunrise. She often said that Harold had given her the happiest years of their marriage, not when they were young and full of energy, but now in their twilight years when their hearts were fullest. On his 85th birthday, a special exhibition was held in his honor called the Dreamer's Gallery. It featured all his most cherished works, each one telling a story, not just of art, but of redemption, of courage, of rebirth. People came from far and wide, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, some with grandchildren by their side, all to witness the legacy of a man who reminded the world that dreams don't fade, they wait. The gallery was filled with tears and laughter, strangers hugging each other, inspired not just by the art, but by what it represented. Harold sat in the center, looking around with eyes that had seen too much, and yet were always hungry for more. In a quiet moment, he whispered to Clara, "I never imagined this." She squeezed his hand and said, "That's what happens when you follow your heart." Harold's story didn't end in that gallery, nor did it end when he passed peacefully at the age of 89. Surrounded by family music and a half-finished painting, he had become more than an artist. He had become a symbol after his passing. His granddaughter curated a book called You're Never Too Old to Dream, featuring his paintings, letters from people he inspired, and reflections from Harold himself. The book became a bestseller, not because it was advertised heavily, but because every page spoke directly to the soul. It was a reminder of the beauty that lies dormant in all of us, waiting for courage to awaken it. Years later, people still spoke of Harold Bennett as if he were still painting somewhere with the sky, as his canvas murals were painted in his memory. Community centers were named after him. And every year on his birthday, people around the world dedicated a day to pursuing something they once loved but had forgotten. It was called Dream Again Day. The world had moved on, but it had not forgotten Harold's lesson. Even in cities where his name was barely known, his message echoed through lives being lived more boldly, more honestly, more joyfully. A woman in Brazil opened a bakery at 70. A retired teacher in Kenya began writing novels at 81. A grandfather in India started playing cricket again with his grandkids, laughing like a boy. Each one proving that Harold's dream was never just about art, it was about reclaiming life. Harold's journey serves as a beacon, not only for the elderly, but for anyone who has ever thought it was too late, too foolish, or too risky to try. He showed us that while the body may age, the spirit does not. While time may wrinkle the skin, it cannot wrinkle the soul. While the world may tell you to settle, your heart still dares you to soar. He reminded us that dreaming is not the privilege of the young, but the right of the living. His story taught us to listen when our hearts whispered to dust off the guitar, the pen, the paintbrush, the recipe, the forgotten road, and to walk boldly into the light of our passions. No matter how dim the candle of time may seem, you are never too old to dream. These words, now etched in his epitaph, live on in the hearts of millions, not just as a motto, but as a way of life. And so somewhere right now in a quiet room, an elderly man picks up a saxophone, his fingers unsure but his soul on fire. A woman in her 70s opens a sketch pad, her eyes brimming with excitement. A grandmother dances in her kitchen, humming a tune from her youth, not for applause, not for recognition, but for herself, for the simple joy of feeling alive again. And in all of them, Harold smiles not from a picture frame or a canvas, but from within them. Their renewed joy, their awakened dreams are his true masterpiece. And as long as there are hearts brave enough to dream, age will never be a barrier again. Because the truth is simple, beautiful, and eternal. You're never too old to dream.